Shalom to Likud-Herut UK, to One Jerusalem, to my longtime friend Eric Rouse, a lifelong Zionist, great leader and a great champion of everything we believe, and of course my good friend Dr. Uzi Landau, to which I could say exactly what I've just said about Eric Rouse. I want to celebrate with you from afar, well actually closer to Jerusalem, the day of the liberation of Jerusalem. I think that this is a day that will be forever engraved in our minds and in our hearts. I remember it as a great outpouring of joy, a spontaneous eruption of generations of yearnings and prayers. The Jewish people had shed an ocean of blood and tears to regain Jerusalem. I think that it is perhaps one of the central foundations of our existence. It was, in fact, the cornerstone of the formation of our national identity, of our religion. This is the city of prophets and the cities of kings, the city of David, the city of the Jewish people. I don't think there's any other attachment of a people to a city as the attachment of the people of Israel to the city of the people of Israel, to the city of Zion. And this is why Herzl, when he decided to launch the modern movement of national liberation for the Jewish people, chose to name it Zionism in the name of Mount Zion in the heart of Jerusalem. It was a fitting name, and of course it took us a while to reunite the city. Jews had been there throughout the centuries. Sometimes we were tossed out, we came back, and since the 19th century we've been a majority. But of course the city was divided because of the Jordanian conquest for the first 19 years. And yet that day in 1967, when the barrier fell, the walls fell, and we could stream into the old city, we could go to the ramparts of the Second Temple, when we could see all the places that the Jewish quarter, Har HaBayit, all the things that we had dreamed about that had been so much a center of our yearnings. I think it was the day in which Zionism was fulfilled. It is therefore inconceivable to stand today before the possibility that for the first time in our history, Jews would readily hand over Jerusalem. It's not that we weren't banished before. We were. We were defeated by our enemies a number of times, including some of the most dramatic events in Jewish history. We were banished. We were driven out. We were defeated. And yet we never gave up. We said, next year in Jerusalem, we want to rebuild our city, the proverbial temple. We want to come back. We want to come back and rebuild Zion next year in Jerusalem, next year in Jerusalem. You could be in the in the ghetto of Toledo, in the expulsion of Spain, and Jews whispered there next year in Jerusalem, and you can be in the Warsaw ghetto in the worst of circumstances, and the remaining survivors, as well as those who perished, whispered next year in Jerusalem. We never gave up. And it was for all of Jerusalem that we prayed, and especially for the Temple Mount, especially for the Western Wall. This is what, especially for the Old City, this is what was at the heart of our prayers. So to see today this easy hand that says, well, we can give it up to, how do they call it? They don't say Temple Mount anymore because that signifies something. It signifies our attachment, our unique attachment to this place. The Jewish Temple Mount. They say the Holy Basin. That's a way to deracinate our Jewish roots. They say we will have an international order there. Sure, like the one we have in South Lebanon. We have an international order to prevent the rearming of Hezbollah after the Second Lebanon War. Only problem is they have now almost 3 times the weapons they had before. We've seen other places where the international order doesn't keep the order and doesn't keep the peace. In our case, that's obvious. If we were to relinquish Israeli sovereignty over the eastern part of our city and over the Temple Mount, it would become a nexus. It would become, in fact, a magnet, a mecca, if you will, for all the world's terrorists. They would compete with each other. Who comes in and who destroys more Christian and Jewish sites? And this could unleash a terrible crisis between the 3 monotheistic religions in the world. It wouldn't be the beginning of peace and an end to conflict. It would be the end of the religious peace that exists now in Jerusalem and the beginning of a conflict that we cannot even imagine. I think that this is one reason why Jerusalem has to be kept united under Israeli sovereignty, because the only time since the emergence of the 3 great monotheistic faiths that Jerusalem has been at peace and has had unfettered access to all 3 religions has been under Israeli sovereignty, and so it must remain. But there's another reason, and I believe no less important, and that is the significance of Jerusalem to our collective being. It's our patrimony. It's the rock on which we stand. A few months ago, President Bush came to visit Israel, and I gave him a coin. And the coin was from the 3rd year of the great rebellion of the Jews against the Romans. And on one side of it said Shekel Israel, Shekel of Israel. And on the other side it said Shana Gimel, year 3, Yerushalayim HaKadosha, Holy Jerusalem. And I said to the president, you know, this was minted when the Roman legions, the most powerful military machine in antiquity, was already enveloping Judea, was already closing in on Jerusalem. And the defenders of Jerusalem, they knew what was going to happen to them. And they didn't mint this for commercial purposes. They minted it as a message for the generations, as a message for us. And the message is, we will rebuild Jerusalem. We will rebuild our sovereignty in Jerusalem. We will come back to Jerusalem, no matter what you do to us. And we did. So I said to President Bush, Mr. President, I don't want you to have any misunderstandings because of things you may hear. This is our city for thousands of years, and it will remain our cities for thousands of years more. We will never give it up. And this is my message to you today. This is our city. It's always been our city. It will always be our city, united, undivided, under Israel. Thank you. God bless you.